I have some of the most entitled parents you could ever believe. They want me to give them money, and it's not just some small amount of money which they could really use. No, they won't even tell me what this money's for. The amount that they're asking for is so big that I would have to get a loan for it. Let me walk you through the beginning of all the red flags that I found that led up to this pivotal point of why I'm posting today. Hello, how are you guys? I wanted to reach out to everyone on this platform because my head is in a huge mess right now and I really need to vent. It's been a while since I let myself vent in front of anyone, and I don't want to let anyone in my real life know that this is bothering me, so I thought I'd share it here with everyone. The reason I can't share this with anyone that's a family matter, and my family has always been picture perfect. I mean, we don't really fight that much with each other, and everyone thinks that we have a perfect relationship, even if they know that we aren't super close and the way that we don't share our secrets with each other. But we do care about each other. My family includes my brother, me, and both parents. I'm the younger one, and my older brother is 5 years older than me. He's been married for 6 years and has 2 daughters. They're twins. My brother and I have always been very close because my parents were never home. So we had to rely on each other for everything that we wanted. We were close as kids, and we still live close now, and if not even more. I treat his daughter like my own, and they treat me like their own as well. Anyways, because we're so close now, my brother, Sam, and I can discuss a lot of family things with each other, especially those regarding our parents. Our parents had always been somewhat more dramatic in every sense of the word, that they never really paid much attention to us. They just did whatever they wanted to do without telling us or even regarding us in that matter. A really big example of that is that my parents have been very suspicious these days. They were acting very weird, talking in hushed voices near us, and they didn't even tell us that they were spending so much money. Listen, I know that it's their money and they can do whatever they please with it, so I should not interfere that much, but seriously, man, it's getting out of hand. They keep selling every single thing they own, and when we ask them where they're spending the money, they just tell us to mind our own business and not to interrupt their conversation. My brother and I even tried to set up an interrogation with them, so we would find out where they were spending thousands of dollars, but it was to no avail. I have a sneaking suspicion that it's a gambling debt, but my brother keeps telling me that Dad has always been super against gambling, so it's not likely that, and that's where they're spending the money. I still think it is gambling because there's no way they need so much money for something simpler. Either that or they're doing something illegal and dangerous. Either way, it's getting really out of hand because now they've started selling really big stuff that has a lot of significance to us, or the amounts to a lot of money. The biggest thing is that they sold us their house. Yeah, you read that right. My parents have lived in that house for 3 decades, and my brother and I grew up in that house, so we had a lot of memories attached to it, which is why we didn't want them to sell it. However, they did not even let us know that they were selling the house. Instead, one day they just decided to text us that the house has been sold and it would be finalized in a few days. When we asked where the money would go to, they didn't give us a proper reply. And when we were still ready, we're going to live there, they just told us that they were going to live in my brother's spare house. Yeah, you see, my brother has an extra house because his wife's parents gave it to her before they passed away, as they added it in their will. By then, my brother and his family were already living in the house, so they didn't want to shift all over again. That's why they've left the house empty, and we're planning on using it as a rental house to get some extra money. What really shocked us about the entire situation was that my parents did not even ask my brother if they could move in. They just texted that they were going to shift in 2 weeks and asked my brother if the house was clean or not. When we expressed her concern about them not asking my brother or even informing him about it before selling the house, they were very shocked that we would even think of something like that, and told us that because they were our parents and we lived in a house that they paid for our entire lives, we should be doing the same to them without any questions asked. Anyways, my brother is a big softie by heart, so he didn't dare to tell them that they could not stay, so he let them. They've been living in that house for almost 3 months now without paying any rent or any bills, and this has added a lot of burden onto my brother's shoulders because now he has to pay bills for 2 houses and even has to take care of his family's expenses, including both of his daughters who are still very young and need a lot of things. I'm doing pretty well financially, so I offered to help my brother pay for the bills of the house that our parents lived in because I saw him really stressed out due to money matters. I told him that I could take care of the bills of the house and that he should just focus on his family instead. I live alone, so I don't have a lot of expenses, whereas I know he has a lot. And, well, he didn't take my offer and told me not to worry about him because he could take care of himself. I think that the reason he did not take my offer was because he thinks of himself as the big brother, who needs to take care of everything, as me, the younger brother, needs protection. I love him, but I know that he babysits me way too much to take my offer. Anyways, after that, we decided that we would not interfere in our parents' business because it never ended well for us, and we wanted our mental state to be stable. However, we could not keep ignoring it when things got bad recently. Let me tell you guys what happened. Basically, my parents have decided that they needed more money, and because they've already sold every single thing that they own and are both retired, they don't have money to spend whenever they want to spend it. That's why they've resorted to asking both of us for money, and thinking that we would just give it to them. Now, if it was a small sum of money, then I would not be minding and I would just give it to them because they are my parents, and I can give them a little cash if they need it. Even if they don't tell us why they needed it, but the amount of money that they asked for 2 weeks ago, it's just insane in my opinion. They asked me to give them $200,000 in less than a week, and when I asked what they needed that for, they get really upset and told me that they've reminded us to stop asking this. And the fact that we're still asking them is straight up disrespect and very ungrateful, and that they would kick me out if I did not leave them alone about the money. This didn't really scare me because they had sold every single thing that was in the will, so there's nothing left anyways. Besides, how's it ungrateful? Because, $200,000, that's a lot of money they're just asking for, and they're not even telling us what they're using it for. It just feels like we're just wasting our money at this point. Even if they asked us to give them $1,000 or so, we would have given it to them, no questions asked, but this was a lot of money. I'm already very convinced that they're using it for gambling, so there's no way I'm giving them this kind of money. If you think about it, this is a ridiculous amount of money to ask for even when you're gambling it. Why do you even do this kind of money, and how do you not win? My brother is still convinced that they're not gambling, but they might be doing something worse with the way that they're acting about it. Anyways, I decided to tell them that I did not have that kind of money, so I would not be able to give it to them. But they get really upset and tell me to take a loan out on my credit card if I have to. But they need the money as soon as I can give it to them. Obviously, I said no to the loan because there's no way I was putting myself through that just because my parents had no sense of responsibility and I didn't want to spend their money wisely. This resulted in a very big argument between us where they called me ungrateful and told me that this was not how I should be treating them because I was their child and they had taken care of me my entire life, so there's no way I should even be thinking about not helping them. The weirdest part about the situation was that every single time I mentioned them not telling us where the money was going, they seemed to step back like someone slapped them in the face. It happened for a split second, but it was observable, if you know how confident and secure in themselves they usually are. That's why my suspicion about the entire thing just increased, because if they were reacting this way about something, then it means it's no good, and they're just doing something harmful, either to themselves or to others. When I kept saying no to them, they started to get even more aggravated and told me that this was not the end, and that they would make sure that I gave them the money that they needed before they just stormed out and slammed the door behind them. They slammed it so hard that the frames I hung next to the door actually rattled with the force, and I kept myself flinched as I heard the loud bam of the door echo in the house. I thought I'd inform my brother about the situation, but I had to do something urgently, so it left my mind pretty quickly. Even though I kept thinking about the situation, the thought of informing him did not cross my mind that often, so I didn't mention anything to him. However, my parents did not stop bothering me after that, and I thought that their ego was super big, so they would not contact me again. But, of course, I told them no, right to their face, but it seemed like they had no shame, and they still don't. They kept calling me, and just telling me to take a loan out every single minute, or at least it felt like every minute. Every time I opened my phone, there was a new message or a new voicemail left behind telling me to give them money or take out a loan from the bank. At one point, they started to emotionally blackmail me by telling me that they were lonely and sad, and the way they used this money brought them joy, which I was stealing from them by not giving them the money that they needed. All of their whining and nagging was honestly getting really annoying, and there was nothing more that I wanted to do than to tell them that I wasn't going to give them any money, so they could just walk their little butts out of my life and not bug me. But even if I bullied my brother for being a softie to not cutting my parents out completely, I'm the same as him, so I could not block them. However, they kept bugging me even when I was at work, and it was getting really overwhelming, putting in the mental energy to keep ignoring them every day. So, the next day I was on a call with my older brother, and we were discussing things that had apparently recently happened, so I decided to offhandedly mention that our parents keep asking me for money. So much money, and they would not tell me that you were going to use it for something, and you know what I heard the next minute? I found out that they asked my older brother for the same thing, and they went to his house and demanded that he pays them $20,000, which they need that week. We were both very shocked that our parents had gone to both of us for money. At first I thought that it was because I said no, so that's why they went to my brother. Sort of as a last resort, but turns out that they had texted the both of us on the same day. Even though they did not visit our house on the same day, they did send my brother a text about it in the morning, right before they came to my house. We checked the time and everything, and we concluded that they must have sent him a message as well, because they probably knew that they were both going to say no. So they wanted a backup option. Apparently, they kept bothering both of us constantly by texting and calling, and demanding that we give them money. What makes me wonder is that what if one of us said yes? Would they still take the money from the other? Knowing my parents, I'm pretty sure that they would, and either way, none of us were ready to give them the money that they wanted, because I had taken a loan if I wanted to give them the money, and my brother was an entire family along with 2 little daughters who need support financially. So, there's no way that he was going to be able to afford giving them the money as well. This just meant that our parents got really mad at us and refused to back down while annoying us to the core about the entire situation. Nevertheless, both my brother and I agreed that we would not give them any money until they actually told us that, well, they were using it for, because it's very suspicious that they keep taking money and selling things to gain money, and then using it somewhere no one knows about. Update number 1. So things have been going a little bit wild ever since the last time I updated the story. But let me tell you guys exactly what happened. So basically, my brother and I thought, and it was indeed very stupid of us, but we still thought that we could just be able to ignore our parents and pretend like the whole thing never happened so that they would leave us alone and not pester us anymore. However, it actually backfired on us because they got even more annoying as time went by, and it got to the point where we are actually physically not being able to ignore them because they would randomly show up at our house and demand money. So, what happened was that we thought that it was over and they finally got in their right mind and left us alone. What I did not know was that they've been bothering my brother about it again, and he had not mentioned it to me yet. I thought everything was okay and nice, but it wasn't because they were still pestering him about giving the money and supporting them about it. I'll tell you how I found out. I parked in front of my brother Sam's house, hoping to spend the evening catching up with family. Little did I know that what was happening behind the front door would ruin any hopes I had of a peaceful reunion. Before I could even enter the apartment, I heard muffled voices, which were slowly and very obviously growing into a heated argument. When I knocked on the door, it's abruptly swinging open, revealing a tense atmosphere inside. Sam stood in the middle of the living room with his face a mix of frustration, desperation, as he kept trying to defend himself again and again by telling them that he did not have the money to give to them. I walked into the room, and my being there almost broke the tense environment of the room. But obviously nothing could stop my parents, so they just raised their eyebrows in a silent greeting towards me, and they continued the conversation. I could see a silent plea in Sam's eyes, asking for support in a decision that went against his soft side, and did not let him do anything against the family when he looked at me. Like I said, he was a big softie, so this was probably making him feel worse about saying no to the both of them, especially because their expressions were full of anger and disappointment. As I took in the silent tension, the room grew smaller, and Sam's annoyance was very noticeable, while my parents, desperate for money, had an expression of anger that just would not drift away. At this point, the expression was making me angry because they did not even have the right to act this way towards us in the first place. It was a scene I'd seen far too many times before I knew it needed to stop. That's exactly why I took a deep breath and took a step forward, choosing to stand with my brother in this situation because, quite frankly, we needed all the support that we could get. For some reason, I've always felt obligated to break the cycle of financial dependence that my parents have thrown onto us, just so that my parents could keep bugging us about the situation. I needed them to be gone, and that would only happen if they realized that we would not give them any money. I tried to stand with them, and both of us expressed our discomfort of being used as an ATM machine whenever they wanted cash, but they would not listen to us at all. Instead, they started to blackmail us emotionally, and telling us that it's our responsibility to give them money because they paid a lot of money for our school and other expenses when we were kids, so we need to pay them back. It was ridiculous hearing it, honestly. It's wild to think that my parents are demanding money from us, being kids and having basic necessities that every single kid needs. Besides, it's not like they gave us anything else in our lives except money. They were never present and weren't even a tiny bit emotionally connected to us. They just came to us whenever they needed us to do something, and they expected that we would do it for them just because they were paying for every other thing in our life. When we told them this, you could actually see the shock slowly coming off to their face, and before turning into anger and straight-up resentment. They kept complaining about how we were so disrespectful and had no heart because we weren't even helping our parents when we were in need, so we had no right to speak about them being present. We had too much of their drama by then, so we told them to go away and not return because they didn't have a space in the family anymore if they were just treating us like an ATM machine. They left. But they told us that they'd be back very soon because we owed them money. Update number 2, so they did not take the hint and they came back. It was supposed to be a simple evening, a break from the daily grind as I arrived at my brother Sam's house. The mood was light at first, with a sense of bonding present as we shared stories and laughed. Little did I know that the peace of the evening was about to be shattered by the unexpected arrival of our parents. I felt a familiar tension grip as the air and the figures loomed in the doorway. It wasn't the first time they dropped by unannounced looking for financial aid. Sam and I learned to brace ourselves for these unwelcome visits because of our shared history of their constant request for money, but it was still very nerve-wracking. For a moment, we decided not to open the door for them, but we knew that they would not leave even if we tried to ignore their existence. So we had no choice but to open the door for them. When they entered, they saw me sitting there and just rolled their eyes at me like I was insolent little brat that they just couldn't bother with, but they still regarded both of us when they asked for money again. They asked me if I got in touch with the bank about the loan, and I said no. And when I said that, they got really upset before they turned to Sam and asked him if he arranged the money. Again, he said no, and they get angrier. Sam and I seem to have an unspoken understanding. We both have refused to continue the cycle of providing money to our parents whenever, they just ran into difficulty. The refusal, however, did not affect them. Their demands were stubborn, encouraged by desperation and a false sense of entitlement. Sam took a decisive step forward as the tension in the room grew, and it was genuinely a turning point in our family's history before we had never gone against my parents in this manner, or at least he had not. His words were like a slap to my parents' face, and we could see that on their faces. It was a choice that would force our parents to face the consequences of their inability to work, and the reality that they don't have money to spend carelessly without even letting anyone know what they're spending it on. The proposal was simple but effective. Pay rent for the house that they were living in, which belonged to Sam's wife, or we kicked them out. I know Sam, and she would never have ever had the heart to do this to our parents before, so just the fact that he was willing to take this step showed how much our parents had hurt him with all their financial drama and emotional blackmail. It was risky of a move, but Sam's determination, yet bitter gaze kept on our parents, challenging them to accept the reality of the situation. Obviously, because our parents are jerks, they did not accept the fact that they had to pay the rent, and they actually laughed in Sam's face when he proposed the idea. That just made it even angrier because they were outright disrespecting him at this point. But before I could make any sharp move towards them, Sam held my gaze and told me not to create a scene, because they did not deserve me wasting so much mental energy. I was slowly getting really angry at them because at that point they had started to throw out insults towards us so they could hurt us. It was very obvious that their technique was to hurt us enough that we would just hand them the money, give it to them. Though it didn't really make sense to me because it was doing the opposite of making us want to give them money. Anyways, after an hour of Sam telling them to pay rent and them refusing, they finally left when Sam told them that they would call the police. Also, it was the fact that they were forced to threaten them in this way because not only were they not leaving us alone, but they actually broke a few frames sitting on the living room table just because they were angry at us. Not only that, they started yelling insults about Sam's wife and daughter at this point. Obviously, none of them would handle anything like that, and those three did nothing to our parents, and the stuff they were saying was really horrendous. I could see the fire raging in Sam's eyes when he was threatening to call the cops on them. Honestly, if he wasn't such a nice and genuine person, I have a very strong feeling that both my parents would be leaving his house sporting a black eye. I'm not sure if they're going to pay rent or not, but hopefully this gets resolved soon because the stress is taking a toll on the both of us. Update number 3. The air was thick in Sam's house, which had been once a warm, inviting place, but now just full of tension. Rent had been paid or risk being kicked out. That was the deal that we had set with our parents the last time they came over and created a whole fuss about us being bad children. But as the weeks went by, our parents' resistance seemed to go against the financial boundaries Sam had set. There was a strained attempt at routine for the first month. As always, our parents' obedient son, Sam, reminded them of the rent that had been agreed upon, but these words were not heard, and it was unclear why they were so casually dismissive, ignored, or even purposefully avoiding us, when they were the ones who had always put such an emphasis on money and always collected what was due. It showed hypocrisy, in my opinion, because when they had given the money, they just chose to ignore us. Sam became impatient as the second month went by. Our parents kept living under the roof without making a single contribution. Even after the reminders become harsh warnings, their apparent lack of humanity was evident, and it was very obvious that they weren't going to do anything about the situation. This month, Sam has been deciding that enough was enough, and that he didn't want to keep having to beg my parents for rent when it was legally under his wife's name. The house did not even belong to them, so it's very unclear why they were being so arrogant about the situation. As the days went by, the situation kept getting worse, and I told him that it's getting enough, that he did not need to keep begging them about this and let the issue just get bigger and bigger. I told him that he needed to take matters into his own hands, so he got really determined and decided with an unwavering resolve that he was going to change the locks on the door, and not let them enter the house until they decided to sign a contract stating that they would pay rent. It was a clear message to both of my parents as we were not going to handle any more crap from them because their area of financial dependency was over, and we weren't going to keep an ATM on us for them after they've given us so much crap over it. The next morning after the locks were changed, our parents went outside the house and their faces were painted with shock and disbelief. We saw this through the Ring camera that we installed in the house way before they even moved in. Anyways, they called Sam while I was still at the house and told him that he needed to replace the locks with the old ones right this instant, because they were the parents, and he did not have the right to treat them like outsiders, because Sam apparently owned them a lot. Again, they kept going on with the fact that they had to pay our childhood fees when, they were the ones responsible for it as parents. As children, we did not ask to be born, so it's not our responsibility, and we should not have to have this conversation at all. Anyways, after that, they decide to call the cops on us and tell them that they were locked out of the house by their child, and that they were not given any notice about the situation. However, they literally have no legal right to the property, and they were just not paying bills. We showed the police the bills that my brother's name was on, and we showed them the property papers that my brother had and my brother's wife's name was on it. So technically, we could have them thrown in jail because they were trespassing. That's exactly what my brother told the cops, and told him that he would like to press trespassing charges, but they told us that they could not do anything about it because it was a civil dispute, and it could only be settled in court. When my parents heard that, they thought that they won if they took the matters to court, so they've been threatening to sue us ever since, and it's been so annoying. Final update. So, as the weeks went by, things were relatively peaceful, and it's been about a week since the eviction. Since we had basically locked our parents out of the house which had fights constantly happening was now very quiet, and it was a little unsettling. But we were very grateful that our parents were out of the equation now, because we could not handle them demanding money from us anymore. However, our parents would obviously not let us stay in peace, so they resurfaced with intense desperation that was clearly shown onto their faces. They returned after a week of us locking them out, and according to them, they'd spent 2 days in some cheap hotels that had rat infestations and bad rooms that did not accommodate them well. And they spent the rest of the week in an old home shelter that finally took them in. When we saw them, we did feel a bit bad that they had to go through so much because of us, but technically when you think about it, it's their own fault that this even happened because they were being careless. Careless about their money, and they're trying to ruin our lives because of it. Sam and I had this unspoken understanding that our lives were no longer bound by the cycle of financial dependency, and that we would not let them have that kind of control over us ever again. As the saying goes, old habits die hard, and that's exactly what happened with my parents. When they knocked on our door, they had this kind of desperation look in their face and really highlighted every single wrinkle on their face. It was a very different contrast to the parents everyone once knew because they were always so confident in themselves, but now they were begging for forgiveness and recounting all the hardships that they went through during their uncomfortable nights at a budget hotel and the reality of having to live in a shelter. Well, they were even ready to tell us the reason that they were using up so much money. That's how the desperation started. That's how desperate they were. At first, we did not want to hear anything they had to say because we just wanted to cut them out of our lives. But then Sam's wife told us that we should at least hear them out to see what they were bothering us for so long. Turns out they actually did gamble all the money away. And then because they didn't have money left, they took a loan which they weren't able to pay back. That's why they were asking us for money all the time, because they had to pay off the loan, and also, they just kept gambling since it's become an addiction, and they weren't willing to let loose of it. But even then, we could not take them in because even while doing that, they were playing their emotional tricks on us and telling us that we should pity them as their parents because they did so much for us that this was something very little that they were asking for. Or they started insulting us or our family, which was very uncalled for. If they had just told us what was going on, then maybe we could have helped them, but because they put us through so much, we refused to help them and told them that they need to sort it out on their own. Then they started shedding these crocodile tears, which I knew very well were fake, because I've seen them shed these in my entire life, whenever something bad happened and they had to get sympathy. Anyways, we told them that we would get them in an old age home, but that was the most that we could do because we did not want any more contact with them. So that's what we did, and our lives have become so much more peaceful. So we know OP and OP's brother basically completely cut their parents off towards the end of the story, But I want to talk to you guys about the conflicting comments that I was reading and all the updates and all the original posting comments. A lot of people were saying OP went too far. It was pretty obvious that the parents were in some sort of trouble. They suspected gambling, but the other brother was contradicting OP, saying, I don't think it was gambling. Ultimately, we find out that's exactly what it was. But a lot of the commenters were saying instead of helping their parents get through this nasty addiction, they basically cut them off and sent them away to an employment home or an old people's house. I just want to know what you guys think about that. Let's talk about it in the comment section down below. Do you think OP could have done something more to help out OP's parents when they needed help the most? My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every day. If you guys enjoy these sort of stories, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.